Thank you so much for coming. This is hilarious. I'm the voice teacher. I have no voice today. This is Where We Come From, Where We're Going, a collection of short performances on the Gullah Geechee culture and the African diaspora, both traditional performances and contemporary work, where we come from, where we're going. We have a great slate of performers today, some CCU students, some traditional storytellers, and some professional artists. And in a moment, we'll get started. Before we do, please turn off your cell phones, if you have not already done so. Thanks so much. So I'm Gwendolyn Schwenke. I'm the convener of this event, but I will introduce to you now Amani Hewell. Come on up, Amani. She's a CCU theater student. She's an acting major, and she's particularly interested in theater involving social justice and social change. So I turn you over to Amani.
Good morning, everyone. We're going to start today's performance with Devonte Owens, who is a senior BFA acting major here at CCU, and he will be performing Rejoice, a tribute to the ones who came before. Devonte? Devonte. All right, and here to introduce our next segment is Mr. Joseph Opala, last year's scholar in residence at the Joyner Institute for Gullah, Geechee, and Afro Diaspora Studies. Mr. Opala is known for his research on the Gullah Connection, the long historical thread that links the West African nation of Sierra Leone to the Gullah people of coastal South Carolina and Georgia. Opala has conducted significant historical, anthropological, and linguistic research over the past 40 years and has applied that research to reestablishing connections between families in Sierra Leone and Gullah communities. His work brings together peoples whose family relations were destroyed by the Atlantic slave trade centuries ago. Mr. Opala?
Come on out.
Paul here. Give a round of applause for him.
We kind of threw it all together at the last minute, but I think it'll be fun, even more fun that way. Now, I think these days most people who get interested in the Gullah obviously get interested from this side of the Atlantic, but I'm a bit different because I spent 20 years in West Africa, in a country called Sierra Leone. And while I was in Sierra Leone, I learned to speak a language called Creole, which is very similar to Gullah. So if a Gullah person, for instance, says, "How una de do today?" How are you doing today? In Sierra Leone, they would say, "How una de do today?" It's basically just a difference of cadence and pronunciation. Years after I had learned this Creole language, I happened across a book in the Gullah language, a storybook. And those stories were collected in the 19th century. And I had never seen or heard Gullah before. And it turns out that modern day Creole, spoken in Sierra Leone, is just a dead ringer for the Gullah spoken 150 years ago. And when I opened that book, I could read every word of it just like that, just like, I had read it before sometimes. More than that, it's so similar that I could actually hear the speakers in my head, because the way the language came, the sentence order, the word order, the places where you would pause for effect, it was all exactly the same. And I was teaching a course at the University of Sierra Leone then on the history and evolution of the Creole language. And when I read these Gullah stories as best I could, of course I hadn't heard the accent or anything yet, but when I read those stories to my African students, they were stunned, absolutely stunned into silence. I could tell some of them thought I was joking. They didn't know there was a language somewhere in the world that was that close to their own. And after a long pause, with nobody saying anything in my class, one of the students put up his hand and said, "They tell that same story in my village." And so these connections are really very, very old and very strong. Now, to make a long story short, I was teaching, when I left Sierra Leone because of their civil war, I was teaching a course on Creole, Sierra Leone Creole, at James Madison University in Virginia. And I developed a teaching grammar and all that sort of thing so that the students could learn the grammar of the language first, hear some tapes, and have practices and drills. And they really enjoyed it. But then it occurred to me, I could make a course like that in Gullah, not the Gullah of today, which I don't know, of course, but the Gullah of 150 years ago. So the challenge became, how good were any of these texts from that period? And I found that there were 3 white people who took down those stories after the Civil War. Now, there were a lot of collections like that, but there were 3 that particularly interested me. And one of them was, and the one that we focused on more in this course, one of them was a collection of stories done by a man called Charles Colcott Jones. He was a planter from near Savannah. He was an odd case of a slave owner, plantation owner, who was a graduate of both Princeton and Harvard Law School. And that enabled him to build back his plantation after the Civil War. He was actually a colonel of artillery in the Confederate Army, and to make things even crazier, after the war, he was the first president of the American Anthropological Association. He was a strange character, and I would be wrong if I told you he wasn't a serious racist, even perhaps within his own period of time. But he was also a scientist. And when somebody asked him, and he was also somebody who grew up with Gullah on the plantation. So when somebody asked him to make a collection of Gullah stories in the 1880s, he did so. And I think it's fair to say that he did that collection with more or less the same scientific accuracy that he did a number of other things. Well, there's no getting around the ambiguity of all of this. Racists and former slave owners collecting Gullah stories. But if you look back at the 19th century and try to find evidence of Gullah storytelling at the period, this is what we have. And of course, the one redeeming feature of all this is that in those days, white plantation owners generally grew up speaking the Gullah language. The question, of course, though, is how different was their Gullah from that of the Gullah folks themselves? And I got some indication of that. I actually said this to my students at James Madison University. I said, find me one page of written Gullah by a real Gullah person in that period in the 1800s. And I said, it's worth its weight in gold. And one of my history majors came up with such a thing a few weeks later. And it was a letter written in 1865 by a Gullah man on a plantation in Georgia. I was very anxious to see how he wrote. Honestly, there was very little difference between his Gullah and what I was seeing, for instance, in Jones' work. Well, to make a long story short, I developed a teaching course in the Gullah language of the 19th century at James Madison University. And the first thing, and it was rather tedious, took several years to compile, was a grammar. 55 lessons on the Gullah language, starting with easy principles and going on to more and more complex ones. And then over time, I also developed from my lectures a book on the history and development of the language that the students could read in conjunction with learning the stories. We also analyzed the stories in my class, and one thing was very clear, and that was that the types of stories and the underlying meaning of those stories were very, very similar to genres of storytelling in West Africa. Not a whole lot of difference in many cases, and these stories were found. The stories that I was finding in Jones' collection, for instance, some of these stories are found verbatim in many African ethnic groups. So the idea for the students was do the 55-page grammar lessons, and then at that point they were able to translate these Gullah stories grammatically. And in most semesters they did a pretty good job of it. So I wanted to come here to the Low Country and give that same course here. That'd be very different than where I was in Virginia. I was sure of that. I wanted to do this in order to develop these materials into a published curriculum for 19th century Gullah. Well, it turned out to be a very special experience. I had 4 native speakers of Gullah, young people, in my class here. They were actually seemed very interested in the old form of Gullah that I was teaching from the books, and they invariably said, my grandfather speaks like that. And they recognized a lot of the idioms that have since been lost, at least mostly. And they were from, the speakers were, some were from Charleston, others were from St. Helena Island and other rural areas. So they brought a lot of information, but the thing is, I have to tell you, I've been hearing debate for years about does Gullah still exist at this point in time? Let me tell you, you'll see evidence of it today. There's one young lady, and I won't tell you her name, but I've been kidding her ever since I met her. I called her Old Man. And the reason I call her that is because until I met her, I had never heard anyone speaking Gullah, and with that heavy accent, who was under 80 years of age. I think she's 20 now. So we don't need to worry about the language hanging on. There's also something else going on here. I asked the students who were Gullah speakers in my class, do you know others who speak Gullah here at the university? And they said, of course. There are lots of them here. I said, really? I said, and they said, there's one girl we know, and she speaks Gullah all the time in the dorms and doesn't seem to care because, you know, Gullah has been a stigmatized language. People have made fun of Gullah folks for generations, and they have tended to keep the language close to themselves in their communities. So I said, could you bring this young lady to my class? And they did. And I looked at her and I said, is it true what I hear, that you just speak Gullah all the time? Don't worry. And her response was, I ain't care about that. And I knew that, you know, something special was going on here. So what we're going to show you today is something that is not going on in any other university like this in the United States, and perhaps maybe cannot, because the percentage of black students here who actually grew up with the language is, as I say, it's rather striking. So what you're going to see today is, first of all, a skit that the students themselves have put together. They wrote the script, and it's in their Gullah. It's not in this 19th century Gullah that I taught them in the course. But afterwards, they're going to read for you stories from the 1880s. And that's remarkable as well. It's sort of like turning the clock back, because it's not like me trying to approximate what it might have been like. I think the way they read it is probably very close to what it was like. One student is also doing a reading from the Gullah New Testament. And maybe most of you know about that. Missionary linguists here in this country took over 20 years to translate the New Testament into modern Gullah. And I have to say, I was at the launching of the Creole New Testament on St. Helena Island a few years ago, and they asked an elderly man there from the island, "What do you think of this Gullah New Testament?" And right there on stage, he gave his answer. I will never forget his answer. He said, "This is the first time I hear God that talk seem like a me to talk." That's pretty deep when you think about it. So I think if nothing else it shows, it was a very good translation. So thank you for listening to what we've been doing here. And let me call the students out. Folks.
And I'll just introduce each of the students now before they perform their skit for us. We have Tatiana Fripp, who is an information systems major and a minor in business administration.
So Tatiana, come on out. She's introducing you all now, so just wave.
Yeah.
And then
Tatiana. She's from Beaufort, South Carolina, and she serves as a student for the Joyner Institute for Gullah and African Studies. And then we have Talisa Gilbert. She is a hospitality resort and tourism major from Charleston, South Carolina, and she is also a part of the Joyner Institute. And then we have Justin Henry, who is an engineering major from Lawrence, South Carolina, and he plays defensive back for our football team. And then we have Kayla Hunter, and she is a psychology major from Columbia, South Carolina. And then we have Stephen Pollock, who is and he is a sociology major from Beaufort, South Carolina. And they're all part of the Charles Joyner Institute for Gullah and African Studies. And here is their skit.
Hello, how are you? Thank you. There you go.
Hey, gal, what class you come from?
Yeah, I came from Spanish. You look sick today, innit?
These classes disgrace me. My head's hurt. All these teachers do is talk and talk and unravel their mouth.
I know you lying.
Girl, just talk. All of you. I tired of this food, yeah. This chicken better not be dry.
Girl, I think Sally cooked them today.
Yeah, that one there always got attitude. I don't know why she come to work today.
I ain't know you playing.
There you go.
Boy, you hot in here, ain't you?
I bet so. You got that big dumb up coat.
Girl, this is Versace.
Boy, spell Versace.
Hey, y'all from the islands? We ain't from the islands, you know. Oh, we from St. Helena. Where's that at? It's in Beaufort, down the road from the top. Okay. You see them turn over there? You wanna sit with us? Yeah, that's cool. Okay.
Who that is you been to talk to?
Oh, I forget to get his name. Hey boy, what you for say your name is again? My name's Justin.
Oh, Justin, come for sit down.
Boy, what y'all boys doing tonight? I trying to get down.
Emmett, I think that club down the street got something going on.
Girl, I know you ain't talking about Kahuna. That thing 20 at the door.
Oh, I ain't going there.
Hey, Justin, you go out?
Yeah, every now and then.
Oh, weird. That's what's up.
Well, why that for buck rubbing to look at our mouth like that?
Girl, I ain't know you need to take your behind on in it.
Okay.
What make you to talk about me so?
That fucker trying to talk Gullah.
Yeah, but he done talk from streams.
Yeah, talking like grandpa, ain't he?
That's the truth. I know about him. He's a professor in it.
Yeah, that's them to speak that old time Gullah, talk about rabbit and things.
You're right, and I want una all for take me course.
How that gonna help me?
We to study the old language for preserve Gullah culture and history, so it ain't for die.
Oh no, I don't think we should do that. They say this language is uneducated. I don't think so.
Yeah, man, I think we should do it, though. I mean, that's part of history.
I guess.
Yeah, I'm down.
Sounds good.
I'm down to preserve the history.
I know.
Well, I'm glad for Yeti this one. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, carry on, Amanda.
All right. All right, so now we will have Kayla, Talia, and Justin, who will each read a part of a story in Gullah.
So, who could talk first? This is the old man right here. And no, tell them what you want.
I will be reading Balain and Bagot. Balain been a hunt, and he been spy Bagot to lay down top of a big rock, the walk, and he mouth the chew. He creep up for catch him. When he get close to him, he notice I'm good. Bagot keep on chaw. Balain try to find out what Bagot to eat. He ain't see nothing. Now he keepin' eat naked rock with what he done lay down. But lion astonished, he wait top of Bagot. Bagot keep on chew and chew and chew. But lion can't make a thing out. In he come close and he say, "Hey, Bagot, what you to eat?" Bagot scared when Balain rise up before him, but he keep a bold heart. And he make answer, "Me to chew this rock. And if you don't leave, when me done long him, me gon' eat you." This big was saved Bagot. Bold man get out a difficult way, coward man lose his life.
I'm gonna be reading Barracoon and Bapossum. Barracoon asked Bapossum, "What make when the dog tackle him? It double up yourself, and it cover your eye with your hand, and won't fight like a man. It lick the dog off." Bapossum, grinny teeth, seem like a fool, he say. When the dog come on top of him, the tickling rib so bad along the mouth that him bleeds to laugh, so him forget for fight. Coward man have all kind of lie for tell to excuse himself. Right. Let's do it.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to be reading But Turkey Buzzard and the Rain. Anybody ever heard of that? Okay, cool. All right. So, But Turkey Buzzard and the Rain. But Turkey Buzzard, him no have no sense how. You watch him. When the rain pour down, he sit on his finch and he squinch himself up. He draw in his neck and he try to hide his head. And he look that pitiful, you feel real sorry for him. And he have to cry and he say to himself, "Never mind. When this rain over, me gonna build a house right off. Me ain't gonna let this rain lick me no more." When the rain go down and the wind blow and the sun shine, what would Turkey Buzzard do? He sit on top of the pine tree. where the sun can warm him, and he stretch out his wing, and he turn round and round so the wind can dry his feather. And he laugh to himself and he say, this rain done over. We ain't gonna rain no more. No use for me for build a house now. Careless man dislike but turkey buzzard.
And now we'll have Tatiana. Oh, are you reading the project too?
I
All right.
I'm gonna read The Bull and the Gnat. One time, one bull been feeding the pasture. He walked slow and he took his head for bite grass. Bombay, one of these your little sandfly gnat, light bunny horn. Bull keep on biting grass. Out of while the thing becks, cause bull never study about him. And he make for when he sing, and he say, but bull, you ready for left now? Uno want me for gone? But bull never crack his teeth. But bull, he say, I go on now. Ain't you glad and have to told me upon the horn no more? But bull, bull tell him, a yeti what you say, but me never know when you come, and me ain't for miss you when you gone. Enough said, man stand, same fashion. Then yeti them own sandfly wing the same. And he think he the hurricane.
Now we will have Tatiana and Stephen, who will each read a Bible verse in Gullah.
Good morning. So I'll be reading Matthew's verse 24 through 27 in the Old Gullah Bible. Ain't nobody able for serve two masters. If you try to do that, you gonna hate one and love the other one. You gonna be true to one and hold the other one cheap. You ain't able for serve God and be a slave to money same time. So then, I to tell on to say, must don't worry about how you gonna live, where you gonna yum, or where you gonna drink. Neither will clothes you gonna wear upon your body, cause your life viable way more than something for yum in it, and your body viable way more than clothes in it. Now then, leave a study about they bird them we fly around. They ain't no plant, no seed, neither get a crop. They ain't put out no crop in the corn house. Still yet, on a Father in heaven to feed them. On a way more viable than them bird in it. And for true, ain't now one of them can live a bit longer cause either worry, ain't it? Yeah.
I thought it might be fun just to expose you to a little bit of the Creole language spoken in Sierra Leone in West Africa. Very similar. Now I'm relying on my memory here, so bear with me. This is one of my favorite Bible passages. Like the Gullah Bible, the Creole language also has a Bible called Good News for Alma, Good News for Everybody. I think you'll recognize this. Some Jew them, we call themselves Pharisee. Think say them sabi God in law pass all man. So they ain't aid for ambok Jesus and for Fenway out for ketchup. One pan them when our law teacher ask him say, Master, what's in the big law we did in the law book? Now in Jesus answer and say, you for like God with all your heart and all your mind and all your soul. Now in the big law we did in the law book. But the other one just started like the first one. In say, you for like other people them and do to them the same thing where you go make them do to yourself. Did you catch that last line? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Add quickly, I think my favorite story in the Gullah language, and again, bear with me, this is from memory. It's about an occurrence in the woods when the leopard meets up with a goat. I don't know how many of you have ever tasted goat, but I think it's about the most delicious meat there is. And of course, that's a very tasty morsel for a leopard. So there's a custom in Sierra Leone, if you start a good story, as the storyteller, you say il, and then the audience says ow, all together. Now, if the storyteller does not get sufficient enthusiastic response with the audience ow, he may say it again, sometimes several times before people are in a situation where the storyteller thinks, they're ready for my story. So remember, it's il, and then you say ow. So I'll begin. Il! Ow! I'm not going to do another one. I think it's the first time I've not had to do another one. So one day, Bragot been waka inside the forest, and he meets up with Bra Lepet. As the goat see the leopard, he's afraid. He hardly able for blow. He's so afraid. You know, say leopard must eat him. And for a long time, the leopard not talk nothing. Finally, when the leopard see how afraid the goats be, he say, okay, Mr. Goat, I will do something for you today. I say, if you able tell me, you goat, if you able tell me 3 true things, 3 things without no depanam, it's true, I go left you also today. I'm not going to eat you today. Goat is afraid. You know, say, he here for talk something where nobody no go doubt him. So finally, he said to Leopard, he said, well, Mr. Leopard, he said, if I go back now, go back to the village now, and I tell the people then say, I meet up with Leopard in a bush, and he tell me, say, he no go eat me if I will tell and 3 true things. Nobody in that village, they go believe that talk there. So after some time, Leopard say, well, that is not fact, that is not true. But he left two true things. So good, don't begin to get small confidence now. He say, okay, Mr. Leopard, this is not the other one. If I be no say, I go meet up with you at this place, I never for pass now. I know before come to this area. Go look at. I mean, Leopard look at, he say, and they say, true. Then they go to know, say, he gets one more true thing, and he look the leopard ready for Isa. And he say, okay, Mr. Leopard. He say, either you na big fool man, or you be not eat bell full before ever you meet me. Either you're a complete idiot, or you had already eaten to your satisfaction before you ran into me here. This was something that was pretty cocky for a goat to be saying to a leopard. So the leopard say, he said, and they say not true. You don't tell me today 3 true things. So I go left you, I no go eat you. But make I no see you 2 times. Let me not see you a second time. Thank you.
Great. I just have to interrupt you for 1 second. As we continue, please do continue to take photographs of stuff that's interesting to you. I'll ask that you don't audio record the rest of our program, because we'll have some artists sharing their original work. And, you know, they'd like to share it with you live and not have it recorded and distributed. Okay? Thank you. Sorry, Imani. Carry on.
That's all right. Next, we will have Veronica Gerald. Miss Gerald, she was the first director of the Joyner Institute for Gullah Geechee and African Diaspora Studies, and she brings both indigenous and academic perspectives to the study of the culture. She was born in Mullen, South Carolina, a descendant of the African slaves brought to the Brook Green and Longwood rice plantations in Georgetown County from the Grain Coast of West Africa in the 17th century. A rich career in academia has garnered Miss Gerald awards including the South Carolina Governor's Award in Humanities, the Distinguished Teaching Award at CCU, and the Jean Laney Folk Heritage Award. All right, and Miss Veronica Gerald.
Why, thank you. And thank you for inviting me to be a part of this. I'm always very delighted to work along with students. I want to before I tell my story, I want to just make a preference. a preface about it. I heard this story. Those who are part of the African American or Gullah Geechee community know that there are certain kinds of things that you do after a funeral or during a funeral. And one of the things is after the funeral and after the repast, the men will go over there and do what they're doing, and the women will go and clean the kitchen and that kind of thing. We would have the repast at the house, and I was at the time, came along during the time when they would bring the body to the house for the, what we call it, sitting up. I see some of y'all over here that's in that generation. But anyway, this one particular night was after my grandmother's funeral. That brought everyone what they call down home. Wherever you lived, you had to come down home. And so that was Uncle Jeff, Uncle Nehemiah, Uncle Jack. The whole group of men were over there. And the women were cleaning the kitchen. And I was very strategic in staying away from the work. So I kind of got out of the way. And during that time, if you were quiet and didn't just kind of draw attention to yourself, you could get away with eavesdropping on what the men were doing. What are they drinking out of that cup? You know, I was about 10. And I heard Uncle Jeff say, Hunter been talking about Bina? I'm like, Bina? I never heard that name before, and I was 10 years old. So I'm really listening. And as the story goes, just in a quick summary, and then I'm going to tell it as Uncle Jeff told it. Bina was what we call the furthest back relative. Y'all know what that word? Y'all know that word, furthest? I'm an English teacher. You know it's not a word, right? The furthest back one. And I'm like, I never heard of her. So I'm listening. And I'm thinking, who is Bina? How far does she go back? And what's the story? So I heard a little bit, asked Uncle Jeff the next day, Uncle Jeff, who is Bina? He says, that's your 1, 2, 3, 4th grandmother. I'm like, wow. I said, well, tell me more about her. And he said, well, Bina, I didn't tell Honor that Bina been the furthest back one. See, I remember my mama been telling me that Bina been tell her grandma about what had happened when it first happened in Africa. Bina been hiding mama foot to foot. Mama go here, Bina go there. Mama go here, Bina go there. And the mama just tired. Bina, go outside and learn to live and think by your herself. Bina didn't want to go outside, but Bina went. When he just stand under the tree to be by himself, Bina ain't know what to do. He didn't look round and think round, and after a while he look and he see a red thing been hanging down from the tree. And he looked back at the house to see what his mama been saying, because the mama been telling him to stay by himself. So he started to move. When Bina get to that thing, Bina reach up and somebody grab his hand and put something on top of his head. Oh my God, Bina been fight back, and he try to pull that thing from top of his head, and he just been yell out for him, mama, mama. His mama run to the window and been look out at Bina, and he see these people been put Bina on top something that have wheel on them, and he run out the door, Bina, Bina, and all he can yell from Bina been talk, mama, mama. That thing that Bina been on, and they have that wheel on him, he been right off, and Bina mama been run, and he been run fast. He can go, and all he been yet, Bina been calling name, mama, mama. Oh, Bina, Bina. And then mama been running and running, and Bina been calling, try to take the thing from top of his head. And Bina voice Stop. Any mama been letting him talk? Any mama been getting that thing that have the wheel on him, been going, he been look around, nobody been helping. Bina! 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 Bina been gone. And mommy ain't know what but do. He been walk around. All the man been gone. All the children been gone. Bina been can't get Bina back. Well, he say Bina been tell a story that when he been on top that thing that been have wheel on him, and that thing been top his head, Bina said that thing been have little hole in him, little teeny hole in him, and he look out, and he see the moon rise, and he see that moon fall. The moon rise, and he fall. The moon rise, and fall. That time that thing with the wheel been on him, stop. And he put somebody else been on there with him. But Bina can't see but the little teeny hole. And Bina feel. He feel the person that been inside him. He touch his arm. He touch his face. And Bina know that whosoever that is been sit side him, been little. And that gal and Bina, they just latch on to each other and they just ride, and that moon rise one more time and it come down one more time, and that time when they get someplace, that thing with the wheel on them stop. And they take that thing off from top of his head, and they take that thing off from top that other person head, and they look at each other, and they see tear been dry on his face. And Bina say something, and the gal say something, and then you know what each other been saying. They look like each other, they the same size as each other, but they can't hear each other. But you know, being a line from a be by itself that you talk with your eye. Line for talk with your eye. And being in that gal talk. And they feel. And they both know that they both want to be with their mama. And they cry, and they cry, and they cry. And then they look upon yonder, and they see people been sit there just like I've been sit there now. And Bina look all over there, look for his mama. And that gal been do the same thing. He go over to where the lady been sit, and they ask, "Honey, see my mama?" And nobody understand what it is say. They look like them, but they ain't talk the same. That time, some man come, and he have on this jacket, and he have something been hanging down from his mouth. Bina ain't never seen nothing like that. These people ain't have nothing been hanging down off his face and in his mouth. But he said to Bina and that gal, "Hunter belong to me now. Hunter belong to me." Then they put him on top, something that ride on water. And Bina and that gal been still hold on and latch on each other. And they ride till the sun rise and the sun set. 5 times. Then they look and they been stopped. And he get up, and Bina and that gal been look at each other, and that man that have that thing on his mouth, he say, "We going to Brook Green." Bina been think it been somebody that live around for me mama. And they ride and they cry. And they ride and they cry. Bina call her mama name so much. That gal been calling mama name. And they look at each other and they have nobody but each other. when they get to this place that they've been called Brook Green, Bina look all around. And he sees some tree that have the same thing been hanging down from him that the man have hanging down from his mouth. And Bina was great amazement about that. But she and that gal been stay together. They've been friends. They've been latch on. That gal have 6 children. Bina have 7 children. And them children have children. And them children have children. And them children have children till one of them children have a daughter named Willie Mae. And Willie Mae been leave Brook Green. Even though they be free, they still been to live on the plantation. And so he leave Brook Green to come to Conway to go to school. Because they said that gal was smart. He graduated the first in his class. Right there from Brook Green. Then Willie Mae meet somebody from Longwood Plantation people. And they married. And they have 2 children. And one of them children got a fancy name. They call that child Veronica. And that's how I learned about my history, about Bina. Now, I've tried as an academic to find Bina. Not sure of the name. I've heard the name several ways from other people. Binya was one. Bina, like people used to name their kids names like they used to have, they remember from their grandparents and their grandparents. Because see, one of the things that Gullah Geechee people did was they kept on the practice. So you'll find people who have names, like when I grew up, have African names, and they're in my class. And then you have classmates that have names like Friday, named after the week, where you name people after the month, after the week, or you close your eye and pick a name out of the Bible. So a lot of those kinds of things were still going on, but I got a chance to learn more about Gullah Geechee because I was Bina's great-great-great-great-granddaughter, because Bina was somebody that was well known in the church and that kind of thing, and her name passed down. So when we moved, when the family moved to Conway, and then I was a part of the household, people from Merle's Inlet would bring seafood up because the diet still called, we had a lecture this morning about this water, the diet called for fish on Saturdays, fish on certain days, fish. My grandmother, the direct descendant from Bina, always wore her head covered and always followed the Islamic kinds of practices. She went out and prayed every day, didn't know what she was doing. I was very ashamed of her because my friends saw her out there on the ground praying. And who wants your grandmother outside praying, especially when you're in middle school? Well, it wasn't any middle school then. Middle schoolers they were relentless. But she did that, and now I'm finding out that Bina was a part of a main movement to bring labor because they had knowledge of rice planting. So Bina got caught at 7 years old being at the wrong place at the wrong time. And that's how my people came to this country, my maternal people came to this country, and that's the story behind it. I call it Bina. Thank you.